our discussion, our analysis of Surah Al-Kahf. And inshallah, we're going to be taking a couple of weeks off until after Eid. And then we're going to be resuming, inshallah, the classes with Surah Al-Isra. That will be the next surah, inshallah. I know that there's a virus going around, so please be safe. Take care of yourselves. May Allah keep all of you and your family members healthy, Ya Rabb, Ameen, and in good, full state of health and recovery, Ya Rabb, Ameen. Right. So today, inshallah, would like to just again recap the main takeaways from Surah Al-Kahf, talk about the transition that we said we're going to go back to, and then complete, inshallah, the discussion of the last page or so of Surah Al-Kahf. So far, we've said that this surah was recited often by those that were going through struggles, whether it was Ibn Taymiyyah when he was jailed, whether it was Ahmad ibn Hanbal when he was jailed. It was a source of comfort and a source of refuge for those who were going through some challenges. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ encouraged the companions in some ahadith. Some of them are strong, some of them have questions in terms of the chain of narration, but still the lived experience of the Muslims in all of these years is enough as evidence that they used to recite this as often as they could, especially in the day or on the day of Friday. And we talked about how this recitation of the surah can provide a light from one week to the next, giving you clarity, giving you the ability to see things clearly. And the beginning 10 ayat or the last 10 ayat serve as protection against the Dajjal, which is the biggest fitna that the ummah will face. So if this surah has enough ammunition to protect you against the biggest fitna, which is the fitna of Dajjal that we will ever see, then by extension it has enough ammunition to protect you against the smaller fitan that will lead up to the Dajjal and the smaller difficulties or the smaller challenges that we go through on a day-to-day basis. And we mentioned that there are 4 main tests that the surah overlooks or the surah looks at. The main test that we began with is the people of the cave who were persecuted for their religious belief, for their commitment to Allah. And they could not resist, they could not stand up against the act of oppression, they could not stand up against injustice. So they had to take time away from society and they had to engage in a state of seclusion. They turned away from everybody, they focused on themselves, they protected their faith. And through that seclusion, they were able to build a strong brotherhood. Same thing would apply to sisters if they're going through the same situation. And by building that strong brotherhood, they were able to hold on to their faith, hold on to their belief. And it took 300 plus years for them to eventually be brought back to life as a sign for the people around them. And that sign was also a reason for them to not lose hope, because it taught them, yes, when you left this world or when you went into a state of sleep, things were pretty bad. It was easy to be hopeless, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set in motion change that took some time, but now you could see the fruit and the impact of your work. And we learned from that sometimes you have to turn away from society, you have to engage in seclusion, but you have to understand, one, the criteria is sufficient to force or to require that. So if your life is at risk, if your faith is at risk completely, we're talking about a life and death situation, then you have to basically disengage. And in that rejuvenation or that refreshment, you'll be able to mobilize and bring the energy internally and also socially required to affect good change. And it would take 300 plus years in that specific situation. And in that is a reminder, not all of us are going to live to see our change, to see our impact. This is very important, because what happens in a lot of movements, a lot of social movements and a lot of movements that are focused on change, there's this notion that yes, in 10 years, in 30 years, in 20 years, we'll see change. But then what happens after 20 years of investment and 20 years or 30 years of work, and you don't see much, people can actually lose hope and people begin to question their entire philosophy or begin to question their entire purpose. Are we even right? Is this even the way? Should we have even done this? Was this a waste of time? So in this is a reminder that yes, change is possible, but you're not guaranteed nor promised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly, personally, to live that change. You're asked to do the best that you can and to plant whatever seeds you have access to, knowing that Allah will set about that change when the people are ready for it and when it is time, according to the wisdom and the timeline of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the first reminder, the first fitna or the first test. And in that we saw many tests, including the way that the people at that time took the story, the lessons of the people of the cave and actually twisted the meaning completely and changed the perspective completely. So instead of talking about how Allah was able to bring these people back to life, how resurrection is physical, not just spiritual, which were theological questions happening at the time, they focused more on the number. Were they 7? Were they 6? Were they 4? Were they 5? How did this happen? How did that happen? So they focused on the detail and they forgot the big picture. And a lot of us, when we're writing, when we're authoring, when we're publishing, when we're thinking, we're constantly being told, problematize, bring a new perspective, bring something that nobody has done before, bring a new outlook on the way that this could be analyzed. So Islamic discussions or Islamic moral and ethical discussions within Islam focus more on preservation, The bigger picture and not the details are as important sometimes. Yes, when you have actualized the big picture and understood the big picture, then you can get into the details and discuss the peripheries, discuss the channels, discuss the fine details, but not at the not at the expense of the big picture. A lot of us, we focus so much on the detail that we forget the lessons, forget the lessons of the surah. Like for example, somebody who gets into the discussions of in Surah Kahf, تستطيع, and they get so much into that linguistic subtlety, and it's important, but at the expense of the actual larger themes of the surah and at the expense of actually implementing what you learn. And so there's a focus there as well on implementation and not getting so caught up in the details and problematizing pre-existing knowledge, but on preserving, especially areas where ethical questions, ethical dimensions are to be considered. The second one is a tribulation of wealth. And we looked at the man who was giving da'wah, the religious man who was inviting people to the path of God, the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this man did not have money. And the person that he was calling to Islam had money. So there was this unequal dynamic of power. And because of this unequal dynamic of power, the person who was being called to the path of Allah was blinded by the wealth and the power that he had, and was also not able to really see beyond the poverty of the person that was calling him to Islam. And in that we learn many important things. Number one, don't necessarily judge people based on what they wear, based on what car they drive, especially if they're calling you to something good. And that's why one of the ayat there, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُم بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ. Be patient in holding on to good circles, good friendship, good brotherhood, even if those people don't necessarily have the coolest gear in town, have the coolest this, because again, knowledge, truly deep knowledge that will actually transform, is not going to necessarily always be attractive. It's not going to be necessarily cool all the time. There will be difficult moments where you have to really put yourself in a situation of self-criticality. You're constantly criticizing or critiquing yourself to be better. And those that Allah puts in your path that will do that, be patient with them. That's one of the lessons that we take from there. And the larger theme is that this is an unequal dynamic of power in giving da'wah. It's when Muslim societies don't have as much. So other societies will look at those Muslim societies and say, why even calling us to Islam? Fix your life first, fix your societies first before you come and tell us, what to do. And in reality, that is an important point. And we have to clean up our mess before we go out and invite people to Islam. But at the same time, we have to also remember the socio-political implications sometimes that limit a society or a social group from success. We have to understand that deeply, and we still have to give da'wah even in those times. Like right now, imagine Muslims are not really cool in the world, right? Muslims are not really the go-to voice for reason, not really the go-to voice for perspective, right? There's a lot of other philosophies or ideologies which are not really deeply rooted and have really shaky ground. But the way that life has portrayed or marketed these philosophies, Islam does not really, in the eyes of people, stand a chance. So Muslims have to still give da'wah in that space, in that time, and we have to embrace the beauty of our faith and the beauty of our tradition and get into that deep understanding that will allow us to be confident when everybody else, subhanAllah, has lost confidence. The Prophet Muhammad says, طُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَاء, glad tidings to the strangers. They said to him, Ya Rasulullah, who are the strangers? Who are these ghuraba? He said, they are the people that continue to do good when everybody around them has stopped doing good. They continue to give and to produce a sound of reason when everybody around them has given up on that reason. So الذين أصلحوا عند فساد الناس. They continue to reform when everybody else is causing corruption. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah اللهم صل على رسول الله الواقعة, he mentions Surah Al-Waqi'ah, that there's going to be a group from the earlier generations, and even smaller groups in the later generations. وَقَلِيلٌ مِنَ الْآخِرِينَ. That the later generations will have very few people that will actually be disciplined enough to hold on to Islam fully. And even the Qur'an tells us that you can love Islam, you can love the belief, and you can believe in Allah and believe in Islam without fully embracing Islam. There's an ayah in the Qur'an that says that. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أُدْخُلُوا فِي السِّلْمِ كَافَّةً. O you who have believed, enter Islam full-heartedly. Meaning you can believe, you can love Islam, but you haven't entered Iman or Islam full-heartedly. So you're a believer, you believe in Allah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Allah attributes that belief to you. But Allah says, "Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa." Enter Islam fully. Which means some of us, we have belief, we have love of Allah, but there are certain rules of Islam that we have not embraced, we have not accepted, and we have not implemented. Maybe out of ignorance, and maybe some of us, subhanAllah, are still struggling with it. And you have many examples of that in this day and age. But the command in the Quran is very clear. You can still be a believer, but you are struggling with parts of Islam. And that's why it has to be implemented fully. And Allah commands us to implement it fully to the best of our capacity. The third story, or the third test that we have mentioned for us in the surah, is the test of the knowledge. Musa alayhi salam, he is giving this beautiful lecture. Everybody's amazed. And one of the people asks him, is there anybody more knowledgeable than you? In that moment, according to his knowledge, there is nobody more knowledgeable. Rather than sitting back and thinking and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the answer to that question, he did ijtihad based on what he had access to at that time. And he said, no, I don't think there's anybody more knowledgeable than I am. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to him the news that there is somebody more knowledgeable. And Musa, of course, decided to follow this man and learn from this man, which teaches us that there are gaps in our knowledge that we have to pursue and we have to fulfill. And we have to try to find people that have expertise in those areas and learn from. Yes, you can be an expert in one area of science. It doesn't mean you're an expert in every area of sciences. You have to know where your gaps are, and you have to be ready to learn and travel for that knowledge and seek that knowledge from wherever it is possible. That's number one. And number two, in the entire story of Musa and this wise man, whether you take him to be Al-Khadr or anybody else, based on the interpretations that we have, a wise man, the main theme in that exchange is that there are many things that we don't necessarily understand that are part of the qadr, the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So some things happen that are going to be very difficult to explain, very difficult to understand, including the loss of life, including sometimes the destruction of a property, a physical thing, it's lost, or somebody that you truly love is taken away, or in the last example, something good that happens to people that don't deserve it. Those are the three things that we see. Number one, a ship that is destroyed for something that is better, for the preservation. So sometimes a physical loss can actually lead to physical gain. Physical loss can lead to physical gain. And Allah shows us that in the first example. In the second one, sometimes human loss can lead to spiritual gain or spiritual protection against tyranny and injustice. And then in the last one, sometimes good things happen to bad people that don't deserve it, but it's in the end, it's actually to empower smaller groups within those bad people or within those unhospitable people that will actually do good. In the example of the two the boys or the children who had their father pass away but left a treasure, the people in that city were not welcoming, but Musa and Khadr still built the wall with the intention, knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that one day they would be old enough to extract that treasure and actually use it for good. So sometimes physical loss can lead to much better physical gain in your life. You can lose something physically, but it's actually to protect you from much greater loss and to actually bring about much better good. And sometimes you can lose people in your life, but that is actually there to protect your faith, to protect your iman, to protect your connection with Allah, and to prevent harm in your spiritual life. And sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give things to people around you that seem to not deserve it, but there's actually good in it. Read closely the story again and reflect on what we've discussed last time, but that's the theme there. Then we discussed the story of Dhul Qarnayn, and subhanAllah, just a little bit, some of you are a bit confused, so let me just clarify about Dhul Qarnayn. Dhul Qarnayn literally means the one with the two qarns. Two qarn. Qarn in Arabic means horn. So the one with the two horns. Now, usually in the classical world, or in the medieval world, and even before that, if you look at the ancient Egyptian depictions, if you look at the philosophy depictions, like in the Greek and the Latin philosophies and art, the two horns indicate power. It's usually indicative of someone who is seen to be powerful and someone who's seen to have control. Some say control over the West and the East. Some people say control over this region and that region. Some say it's indicative of knowledge and power, combining those two. It's a lot of metaphors. And there are even depictions, subhanAllah, depictions of Musa alayhi salam, and a lot of the Israelite depictions and art actually depict prophets sometimes wearing, of course, we don't have these depictions. We don't paint our prophets and messengers out of respect and sanctity for their life, because we cannot imagine them and no art can capture them, and out of respect and adab with them. But in these depictions, you see that the two horns serve as a marker of knowledge and power being combined, or control, dominion over the East and the West being depicted in the form of art. And that's why a lot of the early scholars in tafsir, this is very important for those who want to understand the chronology of tafsir and the historiography, how the tafsir itself changes, or how early tafsir is impacted. Where did this opinion really come from? A lot of the early mufassirun, they took this to be Alexander the Great, even though I commented last time that it doesn't necessarily have to. And a lot of the the later mufassirun said, don't associate it with one person, because it doesn't necessarily mean that, or we don't have enough evidence to indicate or to suggest that it's really this one person. Right. Let me explain to you why a lot of the mufassirun said that it's Alexander the Great, and let's explain why it's not really, most likely it's not Alexander the Great. Right? But before we do those two things, let's understand the main story. The main story of this man is that he was what? Based on the ayat that we have, he was just, he had power, he took every means available to him to use that power for good, to empower people, to change people, and to protect people from greater harm. That's the story, the main gist of the story. All right? And we know that Alexander the Great did some of those things. There were of course some problems with some of the things that he did. We don't agree with it, and some of the depictions and the portrayals that were made of him, we don't agree with that, of course. But generally, he was known to be an icon of justice that went all the way to Persia, and married from the Persians, and had a legacy of justice and a legacy of good, at least as was portrayed and understood by historians. Which is why, subhanAllah, one thing you have to note is that the early mufassirun were in contact with a lot of the Judeo-Christian texts. And a lot of the Jewish commentary at that time, like the Talmud and the Tanakh, would actually depict Alexander the Great positively, and would associate him with those two horns, or those images and those depictions. So when the early Muslims came into contact with the Jewish tradition, they said, hey, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us to read from the Jewish tradition, and whatever doesn't necessarily contradict what we have, we can embrace. We don't necessarily say it's good or bad. We just say, hey, this is what the Christians or the Jews have said, and we take that opinion as a possibility. So Alexander the Great kept coming as an image of this man who controlled the East and the West. And so the Mufassirun said, hey, this is most likely the best candidate for this explanation. They said it's Alexander the Great. However, if you notice at the very beginning of the passage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, if you read very closely, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغَ, where does this powerful man, Dhul Qarnayn, go first? He بَلَغَ مَغْرِبَ الشَّمْسِ. So he first actually settles towards where, guys? East or west? He heads west. So the conquest, or the beginning of his journey, starts from an eastern part and he goes west. Most of the mufassirun that have pointed to other images or other figures, most of those people actually started in the west and went to the east. Like Alexander the Great started in the west and went eastward towards Persia, towards Alexandria, hence the name Iskandariya or Iskandar, right? in Egypt, for example, Alexandria, named very much after his presence there. So for that reason, the Mufassirun who were very critical said it cannot be Alexander the Great, because this individual Dhul Qarnayn actually begins in the east and heads west. So they said, okay, let's look at the other options or the other alternatives. Now, of course, this goes to show you the way. And so far, we've been reading the text closely, but this is a bit of what's behind the tafsir. What's the logic or the thinking process that leads some of us surun to embrace an idea or to critique an idea and to negotiate those various ideas. Now, of course, the ayah is very clear. It's somebody who's got power, who's controlled the east and the west, who had knowledge and power, but we don't know who the individual is. So this is the attempt of Mufassirun to provide an explanation. So they say, let's look closely at the language. Dhul Qarnayn. Dhu, the first word, the one that possesses the two horns. Dhu is a title that was usually given as the first part of the title to the Yemeni kings, to the Yemeni leaders. For example, Dhun Nuwas and others from the Yemen region, the Arabs. So they said this most likely actually is somebody who began in the east, like Yemen or those parts, and then went westward, and they give some possible indications. There's one Indian writer, Indian scholar. He's a mufassir and also a historian, and he wrote a book called يسألونك عن ذي القرنين. And in that book, yani, subhanallah, a lot of us, we don't appreciate the legacy of the scholars who wrote in the subcontinent, especially India, like back then, modern, yani nowadays, Pakistan, Bangladesh, that region. So the entire Indian region, the people and the scholars there did wonderful work and served a lot of the sciences, especially the sciences of Qur'an and tafsir. So that book, يسألونك عن ذي القرنين, he actually mapped out the trade and the travel routes of all of the people who so-called had either two horns as indicative or icons associated with them, or had control of the east and the west based on the history. And he, of course, goes through, subhanallah, yani many figures, and he suggests at the end that it could be this individual. Actually forgot the name, it skips me now, but you can read it if you have time. And it goes to show you, subhanallah, the amount of work that has been put into the understanding of these figures and understanding of these stories. So I'm not saying that this work is not useful. It is useful, and it's important, especially for those who are interested and curious. But it should not come at the expense of the main themes, and it should not distract us from the main purpose of the Quran, which is not just supposed to be a curious intellectual endeavor that makes us really excited intellectually and moves us intellectually. It's supposed to actually cause internal change and behavioral change and etiquettes and manners and change in our akhlaq and change in our perspective. Allah does not really care about the amount of books you have mastered, or the amount of books that you have in your library, or the amount of citations that you can recollect and you can call in a conversation, or you can have at the footnotes of your work or your research paper. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at that. And we know the hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَى أَجْسَادِكُمْ. Allah does not look at what you depict, right? What you present yourself to be. Allah looks at your heart, قُلُوبِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرْ إِلَى مَا فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Allah looks at what is in your heart, and Allah looks at your actions as a manifestation of what is in the heart, the taqwa. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. So we have to be balanced in the way that we read the Quran, yes, as curious intellectual critics. Yes, we have to be critical, and we have to say, well, what does this mean? And what does that mean? And let's actually look at what the Mufassirun have said. And why did they say this? And what they were influenced by, which is intellectual journey. And we have to be ready to do that. But at the same time, we have to look at the Quran as a word from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a legislation, as a shar, as a law, and as a constitution, as a moral framework that changes the way we see life through the prism of Tawheed, through the prism of monotheism. So that gives you a sense of what Dhul Qarnayn is, and who Dhul Qarnayn is, and what the Mufassirun have mentioned and why. Now Dhul Qarnayn, the story or the trial of Dhul Qarnayn is one when you have power. When you have power, power can be very much it can be destructive, because it can actually mislead you. It can give you a false sense of control. So how do you use power to do good and not to oppress people? Dhul Qarnayn serves as that example, who went and could have punished everybody, could have controlled everybody, could have pillaged, could have stole, could have, redrawn maps, could have done whatever he wanted because he had the power. But instead, what he did is he used his power to implement justice. And not justice in how he understood it, justice in the universal sense of what was fair to everybody based on the needs of the people at that time. So the people there told him, we have these bad bullies, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and these bad bullies, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, are constantly threatening our land, are constantly threatening our territory. Can you help us? And you can see, subhanallah, the lack of wisdom sometimes in the way people ask for help, because they say to him, can you help us? فهل نجعل لك خرجا على أن تجعل بيننا وبينهم سدا. We're going to pay you. We're going to give you a little bit of our money so that you can help us. And that goes to show you, subhanallah, that sometimes people they don't believe that you could do good expecting nothing in return. So they want to give you a little bit of an incentive. Can you help me? And I'll give you a little bit of money. And what does Dhul Qarnayn say? Is ma makkanni fihi rabbi khayr. What a beautiful way to respond. We didn't mention this last time, but it's a beautiful way to respond. He says, ma makkanni fihi rabbi khayr. What Allah has given me, what Allah has placed in my possession is much, much better than what you have to offer. Meaning, I don't need your money. I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not doing this for your money. So he didn't even charge taxes or take something back. He actually did this to help, expecting nothing in return. And this is, subhanallah, a very, very, very rare trait. People who do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, expecting nothing in return, they're very, very, very rare, especially in this part of the world where there's a lot of focus on materiality. We're impacted by capitalism, where time is money, and there's always an expectation that you gotta cover at least some part of that. So it's good to once in a while have this notion of giving for the sake of Allah, expecting nothing in return. And from a social point of view, what we have in the story of Dhul Qarnayn is somebody who had so much power that it didn't matter what other people offered, it would not be ever enough of an incentive to be even considerable. And imagine reaching a point of power where even when people say, we'll give you taxes, you're like, well, your taxes are not going to really, they're like pennies. It's not going to make a difference, right? So reaching that power, and there are times where the Muslim community can reach that power, right? And they have reached levels of power like that. Think about during the time of Harun al-Rashid, guys. This is not like a utopia. Harun al-Rashid during his time, and some say earlier, like in the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and we have records that show the people that were applying for zakah and requesting assistance financially during the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz went down to pretty much like zero. Can you imagine? He was able to, in the course of a few years, he didn't live for long, but he was able to eradicate poverty in his community. Think about, subhanAllah, how many resources we have in the modern world, and we haven't eradicated certain diseases and certain ailments socially that are very easy to do, but it's just not profitable and it's not worthwhile. So the governments or the states don't really consider them to be worth investing in. So here we have a lot of lessons to those who are interested in management, in social change, and in using power for good, not for bad. And we discussed this last time, that he didn't just say, I'll do it for you. He says, فَأَعِنُونِي بِقُوَّةٍ. I don't want your money, but I can use your human power. I can use your human resources. I don't want the money. It's not going to be much of meaning to me, but give me your strength. I want you to come and help out. So the way he did this, subhanAllah, is he didn't make them feel like he's doing them a favor and he's going to hold that against them. And he didn't use the knowledge that he has to basically shield them and to prevent them from learning. Like some people serve as gatekeepers. Yes, I have a very rare special skill, so I don't want anybody else to have them because I want to make sure that everybody keeps coming to me. But what he did here is he says, come, I will actually teach you. Bring me your men, bring me those who are capable of working, and we'll build this together and I'll show you the way to do it. So this is the opposite of gatekeeping. He empowered the people to do it. He did not take money, and he showed them how it's done and trained them to build that wall that will prevent Ya'juj and Ma'juj from coming, and to make sure that that wall would be what would be repairable in the case that it is destroyed. Tamam? So that is a very, subhanallah, important thing to reflect on. And not only that, he asked them also to help in the collection of the resources. Atuni zubar al-hadid. Let's bring the resources together. Even though he could have collected the resources faster, he wanted them to be involved in building their own structure, because that would make them what? That would make them own it. And if you look at the recent experience, the colonial experience, it was completely the opposite. We look at this and we think, oh, it's just simple, but it's not. If you look, for example, at dams that were built during the colonial experience, if you look at the train stations that were built, if you look at the airports that were built by the colonizers, if you look, for example, at the Suez Canal that was built in Egypt, the Suez Canal was built on the backs of Egyptians using Egyptian labor force that was not fairly compensated, and it was done mainly what? To serve colonial interests. It wasn't done to serve the people. And that's why the nationalization later on and the freedom, like the freeing of the Suez Canal, took some time for the Egyptians actually to benefit. So imagine I come to your country, I connect, pieces of water to send my ships through, and because I built that thing for you, which I'm actually doing for myself, right? I force you to sign a contract that will basically make sure that I'm benefiting by completely transporting my resources and your resources in and out without you standing to benefit from that. So this becomes a way to cripple communities, cripple societies, and make them indebted to you in the long term. China is doing this now with a lot of the projects that they're investing in Africa. You see a lot of Chinese money coming into Africa, a lot of infrastructure being built, and it becomes what? It becomes national debt. And if you cannot pay that debt within a specific amount of time, it gives then the state that paid for that infrastructure the right to come and actually occupy those places. Imagine your country becomes occupied financially, because nowadays it doesn't, why would I send all these humans to fight and to colonize and to occupy a territory when I can do it financially easily within the rules of the global community and within the acceptable terms of engagement that are less likely to evoke a revolution or evoke a challenge, because people will challenge you when you try to occupy a territory physically. Think about what Russia is doing right now to Ukraine and a lot of the sanctions. When you do financially, people are less likely to look, and it's easy to look the other way. So these are all examples and things that we can extract and comparisons that we can make. And the notion that we take from this test is, or from this trial, or from this passage, is there are times where the Muslims have to use their power and their material resources to advance the cause of Islam, but not for personal gain. Not for personal gain. And I've said this before, when Muslims entered those places, when Muslims went to Egypt, when Muslims went to Uzbekistan and took those places under their control, their territory, yes, those were military campaigns. Yes, those were, you can even use the word, they were colonies that were built. But it was very different from the colonial experience that we know, right? Muslims, whenever they went to a place, they did not enforce a specific way of life. They taught Islam. They gave people the right to worship as they willed. And it took years, centuries actually, for those communities to transform and to learn about Islam and to embrace Islam. And there are lots of minorities that exist in those places all over the world that were protected under Islam. And Muslims, wherever they came, for the most part, they actually came at the invitation or at the request of at least some group within that country or within that region that wanted support. Think about, for example, when the Muslims were invited to Spain, to Andalusia, and they were invited to basically resist the Visigoth kings at the time because of the oppression and the injustice that the Visigoth were basically subjecting the region to. So, and whenever they did enter, it was not to accumulate resources, or it was not to accumulate power. It was not to accumulate land. It was to basically give people in that region a chance at liberation, in the sense of religious liberation, the opportunity to actually reflect and to embrace ideologically Islam. So if we can summarize simply, Ibn Asakir mentions this, and others as well, like Ibn Ashur in his tafsir, they mentioned that the early Muslim conquests, if we use that term critically, the early Muslim conquests were designed and saw themselves as going out of the small region in the Arab world to do what? To eliminate the obstacles in people's path that prevent them from thinking critically and being ready and fairly prepared to discuss and to think and to articulate Islam and to understand Islam. That was the purpose of the conquest. And that's the way they justified it. Were there emirs that took advantage of it for themselves? Of course there were. Were there bad rulers that took advantage? Of course there were. In any system, there's gonna be what? There's gonna be flaw, the human element in any system. But the Muslims did not see that as the norm or the rule or the reason. Those were exceptions. The philosophy itself was very clear, and the justification itself, both internally to other Muslims and to the community, was very clear. Right. Now there's another question that comes here. What's the question? The question is, who are the people, the Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Ya'juj and Ma'juj, whether you say Gog and Magog or whatever you define them as, and they're mentioned other traditions in that name. Who are Ya'juj and Ma'juj? There's a lot that was mentioned, guys. A lot that was mentioned. The Mufassirun went into a lot of discussions about how these guys were like, human but not fully human, and all of these things, subhanAllah, there is very little evidence for. The strongest hadith that we have suggests that these were humans, that they lived somewhere in again, this is the strongest evidence, but we're not saying anything with clear cut. Like, this is just all ijtihad. This is all trying to make sense of the resources and the knowledge available to us and the ayat and the hadith available to us that suggests that they are somewhere in the Asian region, like Asia, mainly the eastern parts of Asia, and they were a very, very strong and capable force that kept attacking and pillaging and causing distress and causing problems in certain places in the world. And they were very quick to move. And some of the Mufassirun have said that they were the ones that basically stopped the Mughal Empire and brought the Mughal Empire to a crumbling end. So, like some have said, they could be Turkic, they could be Chinese, they could be Asian in descent. Allahu Alam, these are all assumptions. What we do know, though, is this: is that they are one of the signs about the day of resurrection. Because Allah says, حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ وَاقْتَرَبَ الْوَعْدُ الْحَقِّ. In Surah Al-Anbiya, Allah says, the wall that was built that prevented Ya'juj and Ma'juj from advancing to cripple pretty much humanity, that wall would eventually tear up and would open up. حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ. And they would open up and basically begin to pretty much advance and take over the world. That will be one of the signs of the day of resurrection. But this comes way after a lot of other bad things have happened. Like, this would be at the time of Isa, the time of the Mahdi. And the only thing that would stop them is what? The only thing that would stop them is the dua of Isa. Like, nothing else, no other force would be able to stop these guys. No other force. Nothing. No other physical power, any power would stop them except the dua of Isa, and it's the dua of Isa that brings them to an end. That's the hadith that is authentic that we know from the Prophet ﷺ. They're a group that are prevented, that are stopped from causing havoc on humanity. And they were stopped by this Dhul Qarnayn somehow. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps them through His power, and the dua of Dhul Qarnayn as well. Allah keeps them and their havoc prevented or protected. Us were protected against it. But Allah unleashes that as a test to the people who come at the end of time. And this is again in the time of Isa, time of Dajjal. And one of the other lessons that we take from this story also is that there are certain fitan that are not worth confronting. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, if you come across Dajjal and you recognize him as a believer, did he say fight? Did he say engage? Did he say criticize, debate? He says run. Don't engage. Don't engage. Don't talk. Don't. This is the time to flee and to protect yourself and to protect your family. But again, I've mentioned this before. We got to be careful when we talk about this, because especially for young people, it can cause this apocalyptic thinking about life. It's all doom and gloom. This is the end. Khalas, I'm going to go to Yemen, sell my house, sell my kids. No, I can't sell your kids, right? But sell everything, and I'm gonna go live in khalas, a little tent away from civilization, because all doom and gloom. And the Prophet Muhammad SAW actually warned against this. That's not what we're supposed to take from these ayat. We're supposed to take from this preparation and practical lessons that we can basically implement in the time that we're living today. Not every fitna is worth confronting. Some fitnas you have to walk away from, and you have to build walls between you and toxicity sometimes. You don't have to always engage and fix the situation. Sometimes building a wall is sufficient and necessary. And of course, those who have power and are able to use that power for justice and for change should use that power for justice and change. Tamam. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in 97, فَمَا اسْطَاعُوا أَنْ يَظْهَرُوهُ وَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا لَهُ نَقَبًا. The people that were hurt by Ya'juj and Ma'juj, when the wall was built, Ya'juj and Ma'juj could not basically climb the wall, and could not penetrate the wall, could not break the wall, and could not climb over the wall. Now you notice the linguistic subtlety here. Allah says, "Sta'u an yadharuhu, istata'u lahu naqaba." So the word "sta'u" has less letters than the word "istata'u." Istata'u, the second one, has the extra T, the extra ta. And because it has an extra ta, it means extra effort. So Allah's telling us that it would have taken less effort to climb, would have taken more effort to penetrate through the wall, but it doesn't matter what effort they have, they could not do either. But it goes to show you again, excuse me, the subtlety of the Arabic language and the subtlety of the Qur'an. And what does he say when this is accomplished? Does he say, "Look, guys, we did this for you. You gotta pray, you gotta praise me. You gotta draw my face on your coins"? He doesn't say any of that. He says, "Hada rahmatu min Rabbi." This is the mercy of my Lord. I've done this as an expression of mercy of Allah, not my mercy. I'm not merciful. This is a manifestation of the mercy of Allah. فإذا جاء وعد ربي جعله دكاء وكان وعد ربي حقا. But when the promise of my Lord, there's a promised time that will come, and during that time, the wall will crumble and will break, because Allah does not break any of His promises. It's promised that this wall will break. Now the question is, how did Dhul Qarnayn know that there will come a time in which this wall will break? That means that he had access to some form of revelation, which means that either he was guided by a prophet or he himself was a prophet. That's what some of the Mufassirun who said that he was a prophet, they say, because how else would he have known that, among other things, right? How else would he have known that there's a promise from Allah to this, to the wall specifically, that the wall would break? Could it have been prophesied? Some say it could have been prophesied before with another prophet, and that's why they say he may not necessarily have been a prophet. Allah says, وَتَرَكْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَمُوجُ فِي بَعْضٍ وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ فَجَمَعْنَاهُمْ جَمْعًا. So let's read the meaning, and then let's explain what it means in the various possibilities. Tarakna means we left. Taraka means to leave. Ba'dahum, some of them, يومئذ, on that day, يموج في بعض. We left some of them to basically clash or compete or beat up or engage with others. On what day though? Are we talking about when the wall was built? They were now prevented, and now they started to fight amongst themselves, and they kept themselves busy, and that's why they're not unleashing their havoc at humanity. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that actually when they open up, when the wall opens up as a sign of the day of resurrection, or as a sign of the end of time, there will be a lot of clash and a lot of fights among Ya'juj and Ma'juj and among others. Like all of it, pretty much everything that was alive will be fighting amongst each other at that time. And that's the better interpretation. وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ فَجَمَعْنَاهُمْ جَمْعًا. And then the trumpet will be blown, and they will be gathered, an ultimate gathering. وَعَرَضْنَا جَهَنَّمَ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَرْضًا. And Jahannam will be put on display. Imagine hellfire would be put on display for those who were truly ungrateful, for the kafirin. Why would Jahannam be put on display? These are people that constantly what? Constantly put on displays of magic, displays of illusion, displays of power. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now the roles are reversed. Now they sit back and they have to watch Jahannam being put on display. Imagine, for example, Qarun, when he showcased all of his wealth and power, and he went to فَخَرَجَ عَلَى قَوْمِهِ فِي زِينَتِهِ. Why did he do that? Why did he wear all of the good things that he had, the crown, the money, the power, the jewels? He wanted to send a very loud message to the people. You all religious people, you're struggling. You don't have anything. You don't have money, but I have money. So who do you think has truth? I have truth because I got power. So for him, he wanted to use his material wealth and the illusion of decoration to actually cause people to give up on their faith and to change their way of life. He did that intentionally. So he put on that show to cause fitna for people. Now the roles are reversed. The people who put on such a show, Jahannam will be put on a show for them. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, who are they? Who are these people? الذين كانت أعينهم في غطاء عن ذكري وكانوا لا يستطيعون سمعا. They committed so much oppression, so much injustice, so much sin, so much haram, that their eyes were not just shielded. You know, Allah says, ختم على, that there was a stamp, there was a little, seal over their eyes. No, that's not the case. These guys don't just have a seal over their eyes or their ears or their hearts. These guys, أعينهم في غطاء. It's like their eye is immersed. Imagine immersed in a cover. They've committed so much wrong that now they can no longer see truth as truth. They can no longer see clearly. Their eyes, it's as if they're dipped into darkness. Their eyes are dipped into covers, layers of covers. An dhikri. They're completely clueless when it comes to remembering Allah, mentioning Allah. They don't know much about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَانُوا لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ سَمْعًا. And because of that, they could no longer hear. Even when the reminder came, they would just tune out. They were not interested. So there's this notion that Allah will keep showing you sign after sign. But if you continue to ignore and ignore and ignore and ignore, you actually code your fitrah. You reprogram yourself to no longer be affected by reminders when they come. And that causes further and further and further distance between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu encouraged the companions, when something becomes clear to you, when something becomes sweet to you from the ibadah, do it right away. So if all of a sudden you hear a lecture about prayer and you're like, man, I need to change my life, this is awesome, don't delay. Because if you keep delaying, Allah will take that away from you because He's given it to you, but you haven't used it. And those that Allah will give more and more knowledge and more clarity and more perspective are the ones, as soon as they get some small reminder, they act upon it quickly and they act upon it sincerely. Quickly and sincerely. Those are the people that Allah will keep giving guidance to. What's the evidence in the Qur'an? وَالَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا زَادَهُمْ هُدًى وَآتَاهُمْ تَقْوَاهُم. The people who look for truth and guidance and they act upon it, Allah increases them in guidance and Allah increases them in taqwa. But the opposite is true, as we see here. Right? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَحَسِبَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنْ يَتَّخِذُوا عِبَادِي مِن دُونِ أَوْلِيَاءَ إِنَّ أَعْتَدْنَا جَهَنَّمَ لِلْكَافِرِينَ نُزُلًا. What is the connection between Jahannam and these people and the question here that is being asked? The people that put on shows and displays of power to delude people, they put themselves in positions of God. They pretty much claim divinity to themselves, whether directly or indirectly. Think about the number of people who, for example, say Alexander the Great is actually divine. As an example, right? Attribute divinity to these figures because of the power that they had, or attribute divinity to them indirectly. How do you attribute divinity to somebody indirectly? When you say, this is the person that sets the rules for us, and even if the rules of Allah are different, we put the rules of Allah aside because this is the agreed upon convention or the agreed upon socio-political rule. That's worship. That's worship in a sense. How do we know that? Some people say, what's your evidence? The evidence is very clear. When one of the rabbis who became Muslim, came to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, Ya Rasulullah, I've become Muslim. I believe in Allah. But there's one ayah in the Qur'an that I'm concerned about. It doesn't make sense to me. And the ayah says, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. They took their priests and their rabbis as arbab, as lords besides Allah. And then this Jewish rabbi says, he used to be a rabbi, now he's Muslim. He says, the Jewish community does not worship their rabbis and does not worship their priests, does not worship their clergy. So what does this ayah mean? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ smiled and he says, when somebody comes and asks, is this halal or haram? Some of the rabbis, not everybody, but some of the rabbis would actually put the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aside, the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aside, and give a different ruling than the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? You know, like sometimes when you go for fatwa shopping, like is this haram? But then you're like, well, it's there, so you try to find a way to manipulate the text and to actually work in your favor. And so those who do that, sometimes they do it because they're very knowledgeable and they're trying to find flexible rukhas, permits, that's acceptable, making things easy for people between two things that are halal. Choosing the easier option, because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not given a choice except that he chose the easier option. That's fine. But then the one who does it to basically appeal to you and to just give you the answer that you want and to avoid confrontation, to avoid challenge, or basically because you're actually going to benefit, right? Imagine somebody's running for office and this is their mandate. And so they want somebody who's going to basically accept that mandate. Say this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. So you say, you know what, I stand to benefit, I stand to gain from being associated with this individual. So who cares if it's halal or haram? You know, the ends justify the means, and then manipulating the text. He said that manipulation of the text, where you are now the one that's saying halal or haram, not Allah, or you're attributing that power to yourself or to your community, then you've taken the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's legislation away. You've said now that this person legislates or this group legislates. And that reversal is actually a form of not believing in Allah and a form of worshipping these people, because you equate them, you put them on the same position as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we have to be very careful. Yes, good fatwas are nice if they come from somebody that is subhanallah, a person of wara'. Like, and you think about the fatwas of the earlier generation versus the fatwas of the later generation. Like, I know, for example, some scholars that have multiple ijazat, they're judges in their country. They've served as judges. They know the Qur'an and the Sunnah like the back of their hand. You can tell them to read an ayah, they read it, a hadith, they read it, very knowledgeable, and they have experience, lived experience. They've heard and sat over, not 1,000, not 100,000. They've sat over, mashallah, tabarakallah, hundreds of thousands of cases. They have lived experience, they have knowledge, they have age, they have seniority, and they shy away from answering any question related to marriage or divorce. They say that it's very complicated, there's so many little subtleties. I need both sides to be sitting in the room before I'm not even going to listen to one side. There's no chance. I need both sides to be present, right? Think about Imam Abu Hanifa or Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. When they were asked questions, before they would give the answer, they would say, give me a couple of days. I want to make sure I read the Qur'an again from beginning to end, read the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from beginning to end, and make sure that what I say is consistent with every ayah, every hadith, and not at odds with any ayah, any hadith. And nowadays, we are so quick. We want quick, fast fatwa. We don't give the full perspective. Nobody wants to listen to the full perspective. It's a very different world that we're living in today. Some of us are actually thinking about automating fatwas, AI, produce fatwas. Why? So it's like such a very different lens from which we're looking at the world. And we need to think about this, subhanAllah, and think about the implications. So Allah says, those who take my slaves, the creation, as masters, like, do they think they have the right to do that? Who's giving them the license to do that? Inna a'tadna jahannam lil kafirin nuzula. The place for these people will be what was just showcased, Jahannam. And that's why we got to be very careful from not falling into this, And also the onus on the person asking for a fatwa to provide the full picture and the full details without hiding. Often in counseling cases, the sister will go bashing the guy for like 3 hours. She will paint him as the devil. Khalas, mashallah, this guy is the worst human being in the world. And then the last 5 minutes, just to be fair, he does give me like $10,000 a month. He does spend a lot of time with the kids. He takes them out, and once in a while, like, ukhti tayyib, what have you been saying for the last 4.5 hours talking about this guy in a negative way? And it goes both ways too. Like, sometimes it's just the guy will do the same. She's this and this and this and this. And a lot of times when we're fighting, when we're engaged in conflict, our emotions get the best of us and we don't actually provide accurate depictions, which is why seniors who have been in the field for a long time will not give any advice or any kind of one-sided advice, especially to marriage or divorce, except if people are sitting in the same room. But there's just a discussion in terms of being accurate with seeking legislation, rulings, and also being accurate when giving legislation and rulings, and understanding that this can actually reach a point of kufr and reach a point of shirk that is very, very destructive. if it's done intentional. That's what, to be very cautious, not to attribute the power to humans, to attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a beautiful ending. You know, one of the most beautiful endings of the Quran, Quranic surah, قُلْ هَلْ نُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِالْأَخْسَرِينَ أَعْمَالًا. Shall we tell you? Imagine after you've gone through the whole surah and all of these tests and all of these tribulations, Allah asks you a question. Do you know who the most lost are in terms of their actions? Meaning, whose actions are most lost? Imagine people who are the biggest losers. Allah's asking, do you know who the biggest losers are in terms of action? We say who? Allah answers, الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا. They're the ones who have sa'i that are completely misguided. Effort that is completely misguided. Misdirected effort. They're hustling, 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 but they're not hustling to the right cause or for the right reason. They're hustling for the wrong reason and at the wrong cause. وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ. In this world, وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ, and they think, they convince themselves, أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا, that they're actually doing good. They think that they're reformers, they think that they're actually changing the world, that they're social justice warriors, or whatever else, right? I'm not attacking anybody here, just as an example, right? So sometimes we convince ourselves that what we're doing is good. But based on what principles, based on what grounding in the Qur'an, in the Sunnah, in the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, in the Islamic moral guide and framework, very far away from it. And that's why you always have to step back. And that's why reading the Qur'an constantly is so rejuvenating. Because what it does is it forces me to say, okay, I've convinced myself that I'm good, but am I actually good? And what does good mean? And who decides what is good and who's not? If the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself had that moment with his wife Aisha, where she was just amazed with his work ethic and discipline, and she told him, Ya Rasulullah, do any of us enter Jannah through our effort? And he says to her, no, Aisha, nobody enters Jannah through their effort. He says, not even you, Ya Rasulullah. He says, not even me, except if Allah were to shower me with His compassion and mercy. So meaning our efforts are never enough for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deserve anything. How do you justify eternity in Jannah for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 80 years of service, worship? And that worship, what have you done? You've done good for yourself. It's good for you. Your prayer benefits you. Your fasting benefits you. Your zakah benefits you in this dunya. Your discipline as a Muslim benefits you. So what have you really done to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's why the believer constantly looks at himself or herself and says, I could be better. I'm never in a calm, in a complacent position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not good enough. I'm never good enough for Allah. That balance is very key. I'm never good enough, but you don't let shaitan use that to say you're dirty, there's no point, and to limit or to inhibit. So I'm never good enough. You say that so you can move. But the minute it stops you from moving, then it's been weaponized by shaitan against you. So I'm not good enough except when I'm attached to Allah. My power does not come from me. My discipline does not come from me. It comes from Allah. So I attach with Allah and to Allah constantly, asking Allah to give me that power, to give me that boost, knowing that on my own I'm not enough, and my efforts on their own, they're never sufficient. أولئك الذين كفروا بآيات ربهم. So who are those people that are deluded in this world? They constantly pursue things, but they're distracted and they're not really focusing on the right things and the right reasons and the right actions or the right intentions. They're the ones who disbelieve in the evidence, the signs of Allah. Allah's miracles are all around them. Allah's work is all around them. And they dismiss that completely. And they don't believe in the day that they will finally meet Him and stand to be held accountable. And for that reason, they're not doing things for Allah. And they're building a business. What are you doing? Why are you building the business? As a legacy. They're doing work in Africa, building wells and whatnot. But why are you doing it? Whose name are you actually doing it in? It's not associated with belief in a higher power, and it's not associated with a framework of Islam. And for that reason, they're doing it for someone else or something else. They're not going to be rewarded with Allah because they weren't doing it for Allah. Allah was not an active agent in the process, in their thinking. It's like when you go and you work for McDonald's, on paper you have a contract with McDonald's, or you have a contract with a restaurant. We're not promoting McDonald's. You have a contract with a restaurant, but you go to another restaurant to do the exact same work. You can't go back to the restaurant that you signed the contract and say, I was doing the exact same work. Can I get paid? Like, no, you didn't do it for me. Same thing with Allah. You can't go to Allah and be like, I did such great work, but you didn't do it in my name. You didn't do it for Allah. You didn't do it with the notion that Allah gave you the gift of life and health and wealth, so you're using it as an opportunity to express gratitude for those things. You did it for whatever other reason. Social recognition, branding, tax deductions, elections, whatever else. Or just to feel good. Some people do it just to feel good. Okay, but like so it becomes utopic almost, right? It becomes self-fulfilling. So you're doing it as a form of self-worship, as self-healing, to overcoming your trauma. Great. But you didn't do it for Allah. Has to be sincerely for Allah. And that's why it requires an active sitting back and saying, why am I actually doing this? And every single time when you do something good or about to do something good, you constantly re-examine the intention and you try to link it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, any action that does not begin with Bismillah is going to be what? Is going to be either less rewarded, or it's going to be null, rendered null completely. And why Bismillah? Because once you start with Bismillah, that's an active invocation. I'm not accessing this water. What have I done to earn this water? Nothing. Allah gave it to me. So when I drink it, I'm saying, thank you, Allah. You've given me this. When I eat the food, what have I done to earn the gift of food? Yes, I've cooked it, I've prepared it, I've assembled it. All we do in nature is we reconfigure what's already existent. We don't bring anything into existence out of nothing. We manipulate, we modify, we restructure, we reconfigure what's existent. And everything that exists, Allah has set in motion and brought to existence directly or indirectly. So that's why when I interact with everything, it's not something that Allah demands of you simply because He just wants to feel good about it. It's just the act of reality. He's brought everything into existence. It's His. Excuse me. And for that reason, we have to express that gratitude. Let me just take a water break here. For those people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا نُقِيمُ لَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَزْنًا. Their actions, their deeds are not going to have much weight on the day of resurrection. ذَلِكَ جَزَاؤُهُمْ جَهَنَّمْ بِمَا كَفَرُوا وَاتَّخَذُوا آيَاتِي وَرُسُلِي هُزُوًا. They will get Jahannam again. Think about how many times Jahannam is mentioned in these ayat. SubhanAllah. As a deterrent for such disbelief. They're the ones who will be given Jahannam because they denied, they were ungrateful, and they took the ayat, the miracles of Allah, the evidence of Allah, and the prophets and messengers as mockery. So not only did they prevent others, they also did what? They also mocked the deen of Allah, mocked people of faith, and mocked religion, and mocked the tradition. Then Allah mentions, at the end of all of these ayat about Jahannam, Allah gives glad tidings, gives hope. We mentioned always that Allah gives, yes, deterrence, but He always gives a room for hope. And إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ كَانَتْ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتُ الْفِرْدَوْسِ نُزُلًا. Al-Firdaus is mentioned only 2 places in the Qur'an. It's mentioned in Surah Al-Mu'minun and mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf. And Firdaus is considered to be one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful, most prestigious place in Jannah. So Allah mentions that the people who believe and do good deeds, right, commit to action based on their belief, they will كَانَتْ لَهُمْ. It's not that they will get. Already for them, كانت in the past. It's as if it's guaranteed. لَهُمْ جَنَّاتُ الْفِرْدَوْسِ نُزُلًا. Not just one Jannah, multiple gardens in Firdaus that become their home. خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. They will live there, guys. They will live there forever. لَا يَبْغُونَ عَنْهَا حِوَلًا. They will not want to move or to relocate away from it. قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَدَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي وَلَوْ جِئْنَا بِمِثْلِهِ مَدَدًا. If the seas in the world, the water bodies, the oceans, all of the lakes, all of the waters were ink, 2 pens, and you would try to write and to number and to count all of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using the ink in the world, the water in the world, you would not be able to count the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would not be able to count the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would not be able to count the privileges that Allah has given us. وَلَوْ جِئْنَا بِمِثْلِهِ مَدَدًا. And even if every time you run out of ink, Allah gives you double the ink. continuously, infinitely. Meaning, if every time you run out of water in this world, write in the blessings of Allah, and Allah keeps giving you more and more water of the same magnitude, you would never be able to fully actualize and fully understand the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just think about the number of creations that are expanding out of our reach and ability to see. Like the number of stars that have already expanded beyond our ability to see and perceive. Think about the number of creations that we're not even aware of. And imagine every cell in your body, every atom, looking at it under a microscope. Remember when in histopathology, when you use dyes and you watch these proteins and you watch these, subhanAllah, cells moving, it's incredible. Every one of those is a kingdom in its own. Imagine the creation of Allah. How many cells do you have in your body? And every one of those cells, in the nucleus of every one of those cells, it's like a kingdom of its own. You zoom into just the DNA within, subhanAllah, the nucleus, and you just analyze the code, the sheer language, the sheer logic, the way the things move, the way the proteins fold. And subhanAllah, whether on the cellular level, the molecular level, the subcellular level, or whether you look up above you, the celestial world and everything in between, there are signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to us everywhere. That speak about beauty, that speak about grace, that speak about power and capacity. And how is it that we have the audacity to think that we're in control? To think that we can articulate morality and we can guide our own, existence or our own life, subhanAllah, without attributing, showing gratitude and following the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ يُوحَى إِلَيَّ أَنَّمَا إِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. After all of these, subhanAllah, Allah gives us a beautiful command at the end of the surah. What's the command? Say to them, O Muhammad, I am just a prophet. I'm just a human. أَنَا بَشَرٌ. I'm just a human being just like you. مِثْلُكُمْ يُوحَى إِلَيَّ. The only difference is that Allah has given me this revelation. What has He told me? أَنَّمَا إِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. That your Lord, the main purpose of this revelation is to articulate one message. That your Lord is one. And because of that, He set for you a path to connect with Him. فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ. Whoever wants to meet this Lord, if you want to meet this Lord, you can't meet this Lord in this world physically, but you can in the hereafter. So if you look forward to meeting Him, if you still have that belief in you that there is a Lord, that He exists, and He's guiding everything that exists, then, and if you want to meet Him, and you look forward to the day that you meet Him, فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. Let them leave a good legacy behind of action in His name, and let them not associate with Him anybody else. He deserves that position in your life, and you cannot commit anybody or share anybody with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that position. I know it's easy to say, but it's very difficult to actually actualize. It's very difficult to actualize. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that I do fear for you a shirk al-khafi, that the major shirk will not happen for Muslims. The Prophet said that the idols will not be worshipped again in this world, in the peninsula. But there will be subtle ways, very minor forms of shirk that people will still fall into. For example, people that wear different talismans and wear different things, and they say, this is what gives me power. Or hang something small in their car and say, this is what protects me. No, Allah is what protects you. Or even people who have ayat in the Qur'an that they put up and they say, this is what's going to protect the room. No, the Qur'an does not protect on its own. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that protects. And that's why a lot of the earlier fuqaha, they actually disliked using the Qur'an as decoration or as calligraphy or as art in the house. Because it is not revealed to, beautify rooms or places. They did this out of reverence. They said that this is supposed to actually change you on the inside. Change you, change your belief, and it should transform your action. And they considered it to be a disrespect to the Qur'an or disrespect to the ayat of the Qur'an for it to be used. But there's still a group of scholars say it's okay, it's fine to do, as long as it is evoking meaning. So you have an ayah that you basically have in your house that you read and it evokes meaning. And it's through that meaning that you read that you actually connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So somebody, for example, who has a room about an ayah in the room, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will not change people until they change themselves. So that ayah is constantly reminding you every day to change yourself, to change your life. So that's the purpose. The purpose is reminder, not this is going to actually give me this or protect me from that, right? Or the purpose is to remind the guests, right? For example, ادخلوها بسلام آمنين. In the Masjid al-Nabawi, at the very entrance, we have an ayah, enter into this abode in peace and in security. That's a reminder. That's an ayah about Jannah. It's like when you enter this masjid, you're as if you're entering Jannah in this world, because there's the Rawdah, and the Rawdah is considered to be the most blessed, the most beautiful, the most comfortable, or the most accurate parallel to Jannah in this world. And for those of you who prayed in the Rawdah, whether sisters or brothers, subhanallah, yani back when it was empty, I remember once, we went on a like a visit, and we stayed there from Fajr all the way to Isha. And we're just praying, very empty, mashallah. That day from Fajr to Isha, of just staying in the Rawdah, there's nothing in terms of parallel, in terms of peace and comfort and calm. And subhanallah, what some of us would do is we don't want to lose our spot. So we took a little bit of water with us in case we need to make a little bit of wudu in the corner. And falling asleep, if you fall asleep in that space, and you take a nap even for 10 minutes, or even 2 minutes, 3 minutes, while you're sitting down, just you let your eyes close a little bit and you wake up, it's just subhanallah, something out of this world. It's a plug-in. Make sure you go to the Rawdah and make sure you do enjoy the Rawdah. But having the ayah as a reminder, enter in peace, security, no problem. So it's supposed to evoke a meaning, not supposed to be the protective thing that is invoked besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a reminder of Allah's power, not a replacement for Allah's power. And it's very important too. The subtlety is very the difference is very subtle. But it's very important to think about and to reflect. Tamam? May Allah bless you, Ya Rabb. Ameen, ameen, ameen. So we talked about the transition and how we're going to go back to the transition. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, this is after the conversation between the man who had money and the man who did not. And how the man accused the man who had money, basically accused him of a bunch of things. And then the man who didn't have money responded first, tawheed, then responded to correct the misconceptions that he had. Then he defended himself, and that teaches us the priority through which we should engage with people. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. The world, if you want to look at it as an example, is like what? كَمَاءٍ أَنزَلْنَاهُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. It's like water that has come from above. فَاخْتَلَطَ بِهِ نَبَاتُ الْأَرْضِ. And what happens when that water came from above? The water mixed with the plants and the seeds and the vegetation, the green in this earth. And when that happened, obviously what happens when seeds receive water and greenery is mixed with that water? The water becomes fuel, nutrition, and now that seed grows into a tree. Allah skips the whole process of growth. Allah says, فَأَصْبَحَ هَشِيمًا تَذْرُوهُ الرِّيَاحُ. It becomes yellow and dry enough that it's able to be blown by the wind. And fa is fa al-fawriya, it's immediate. Like that's this world. One day you're in the midst of your youth, you're running and hustling and bustling. The next day you're old and you're on your deathbed. And it feels like it's just been seconds, minutes. The beauty, the gray, all of that is gone. All of that is gone. That's the nature of this world. And you ask a lot of people who are in the last moments in this world, they will tell you this is the most accurate depiction of what life was like. It felt like it was just seconds, right? That's not supposed to cause us to be like, what's the point? There's no point. I'm going to die anyway. No, because it's supposed to get us to value time and to use every minute of it to do something productive in the name of Allah. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ مُقْتَدِرًا. But Allah is over all things capable. So Allah can reward you when you use your time for good, and Allah is capable in all times and spaces. Now, subhanAllah, this is one of my favorite ayat in the surah. المال والبنون زينة الحياة الدنيا والباقيات الصالحات خير عند ربك ثوابا وخير أملا. المال والبنون, wealth and children are zina. Zina, not qima. They're not value in themselves, they're zina. Zina means decoration, privileges, extra things that you don't necessarily need. Allah's reminding us the gift of life is enough as a blessing. That if you just existed with no money, no children, nothing else, you just existed, that is enough. Everything else is zina, is decoration. is beauty. Allah gives you to enjoy. But what we've done is we've made wealth qima. We don't make life itself the blessing, the value, right? How do we assess things? We assess it based on wealth. But actually Allah is saying, teaching us, assess life. Every minute. That is the true commodity. Every blessing that Allah has given you. That's what's truly worth. So you're conscious, you're very cautious not to spend your money, but you're very, very extravagant in how you spend your time, your life, breath, just running around. You're just giving up your life, not using it for something productive. But Allah's reminding us that children and wealth, there's zina, like the leaves on the tree. It's beautiful, it's decorative, but it comes and goes. So your value is not assessed based on how many kids you have. It's what legacy did these kids leave, not how much money you had. What did you do with that money? وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَاتُ خَيْرٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ ثَوَابًا وَخَيْرٌ أَمَلًا. And the things that you leave, that you take with you, baqiyat, the things that actually stay in the akhirah with you, khayrun. That is better عند ربك, in the sight of Allah. That is where true credit is. وخير أملا. And truly, that's where hope should come from. So a lot of us, we have kids, we have wealth, because we have hope that our kids will take care of us one day, our wealth will take care of us one day. We have this hope that I don't want to grow old and be alone, and you have all this stuff, but no kids to enjoy, no grandkids, right? So we have this notion of hope associated or attached to these things. But Allah's saying, wealth, children, yes, that's a source of hope, but these are decorations. That's not the real purpose. The real purpose is to connect with Allah and to use whatever good you have to build your credit with Him and to prepare for the day that you meet Him. And then He talks about that day. That day is described, يَوْمَ نُسَيِّرُ الْجِبَالِ, that the mountains themselves will be made to move. وَتَرَى الْأَرْضَ بَارِزَةً. And then you'll find that the earth itself will actually protrude. What do you mean? So the earth will open up and whatever is buried will be forced out. So all that is buried, the treasures of the world, will be forced out. وَحَشَرْنَاهُمْ. And everything that is buried in the world, the dead bodies, will be brought back to life. فَلَمْ نُغَادِرْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. And nothing will be left unaddressed. No one individual will be left uncalled for. وَعُرِضُوا عَلَى رَبِّكَ صَفًّا. And all of them will be lined up. يَوْمَ نَدْعُو كُلَّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ. Every group will be brought to judgment with their imam, the leader of that group. So your family with the head of the family, the head of the household. Your community with the head of the community. Your ummah with the head of the community. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell them, لَقَدْ جِئْتُمُونَا كَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ بَلْ زَعَمْتُمْ أَلَّا نَجْعَلَ لَكُمْ مَوْعِدًا. Here you are, as you were promised. You've come back. This is the day that all the revelation has spoken about. It is here. أُوضِعَ الْكِتَابِ. And then the book is placed. What book? What book is placed? The scholars say that this is the أللهم المحفوظ. أللهم المحفوظ, which has the record of everything that humanity has done, everything that has happened. So all of the record of every creation that existed, every moment in humanity, will be placed and it will be downloaded. It will be downloaded. Meaning, in that second, every one of us will know everything that happened in the course of humanity, in the course of history. وُضِعَ الْكِتَابِ. And some say the kitab is actually what will be downloaded? The record of every individual. So maybe not the record of all creations will be downloaded. It's the record of your own life will be downloaded. So it's like, when someone says, my life flashed right in front of me, literally your life flashes right in front of you. Everything you've done, everything you've said, and it'll just seem like it was seconds, but you'll be very well aware in full detail of every moment that was lived and experienced. Every thought, every desire, acted upon or not acted upon. فَتَرَى الْمُجْرِمِينَ, the criminals who committed the crime and the atrocities that we discussed, مُشْفِقِينَ مِمَّا فِيهِ. They're very, very much what? They're very much distressed because of the contents. وَيَقُولُونَ. And what did they say? يَا وَيْلَتَنَا. Oh God, يَا وَيْلَتَنَا. Like, when someone is saying, woe to me, oh man, I'm done. مَا لِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ. What's going on with this book? لَا يُغَادِرُ صَغِيرَةً وَلَا كَبِيرَةً إِلَّا أَحْصَاهَا. It doesn't leave anything small or large except that it's accounted for. Now usually people begin with the big, like it doesn't leave anything big or small. But here, small or big. Why? Some ulama say because it's the small things that lead to the big things. And some say sometimes we think and we forget the small things. So the big things we remember. We remember. There's part of our trauma, part of our guilt. But it's the small things that we do and not pay attention to that are actually highlighted first. Because we've done them, they may have hurt somebody, they may have changed somebody's life for the negative. We completely forgot and we moved on. But Allah is reminding us of that. And when that is downloaded into our memory or we're accessing it somehow and we see it, then we are shocked and we are in a state of reminiscing about, subhanAllah, how many things we've actually done. وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. And they found everything that they've done present, and Allah does not show any injustice to any person, any being, any individual. وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. No injustice will be experienced by any single individual. Everything done or undone or not done will be accounted for, whether done to you or done to somebody else. And subhanAllah, when you think about this, it is important to reflect on the fact that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us that one of the biggest difficulties that we encounter are the difficulties of reconciliation on that day for those that we've wronged. And that's why one of the best rules to live life by is if you have a choice between wronging somebody or walking away while being wronged, if it comes to choosing between that, it is better to walk away, because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, and I guarantee a house in the middle of Jannah for somebody who leaves an argument or a debate, even if they are the ones that are right and if the other person is wrong. So whenever there's a conflict or a debate or a difficult situation, it's better to be the one that you have to kind of be the one that has to be patient, be the one that gives, better than the one that takes or overtakes. And subhanAllah, it's as if we come to a full circle. We go back to the first episode in the creation of humanity. So we went to the Day of Judgment, and now we come back to the first episode in the creation of humanity. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ. Why do we go back to when the angels were asked to prostrate to Adam, the prostration of respect, that bowing of respect? Why? Because that is the beginning of all of the sins that would come after that. The first sin. So Allah is giving us an example of what led to the first sin. Arrogance. Arrogance. And the whispers of shaitan that follow and continue to be a form of temptation. So it's as if the Qur'an reminds us where that sin comes from. It comes from when Adam was asked to prostrate, when Iblis was asked to prostrate to Adam, and the angels were asked to prostrate. Everybody prostrated, فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا Iblis, except Iblis. And Iblis comes from the word ablasa in Arabic, which means to lose hope and to become somebody who causes others to lose hope. So Iblis as a name means the one who his purpose is to cause you to lose hope, and he himself has lost hope. You know when somebody's just given up? So what they want to do is what? Get everybody else to give up. Imagine somebody who's going into an exam knowing that they're going to fail. So what do? They try to ruin everybody else with them. Guys, why are you studying? There's no point in studying. That attitude. That's the Iblis attitude. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the angels prostrated except Iblis. كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ. He was from the jinn. This answers those who say that Iblis was an angel. Strongest opinion is he was not an angel. He was from the jinn. فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ. But he had will, free will, just like we do, and he used that will to actually deviate from the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the question is given, أَفَتَتَّخِذُونَهُ وَذُرِّيَّتَهُ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِن دُونِي وَهُمْ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ. Are you going to follow him, Iblis, and his progeny, and take them as awliya, as your firsts, the ones you consult, the ones you listen to, the ones you respect, instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though they are your enemy? وَهُمْ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ. بِئْسَ لِلظَّالِمِينَ بَدَلًا. That is truly the worst kind of exchange, the worst kind of replacement, where you replace the position of Allah with the position of the shaitan, the devil. And the shayateen don't necessarily have to be human, jinn, they could be human too. Shayateen al-ins wal jinn, as Allah mentions, the shayateen from the humans that whisper and tempt, as much as the shayateen from the jinn whisper and tempt. All right, it is Maghrib time. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless all of you, to accept from all of us. Surah Kahf, if there's anything that you want to take from it, subhanallah, just remember it is the light from one week to the next. Remember the 4 temptations, and remember to read it, to memorize it, because it is a protection against Dajjal. We did discuss quite a lot, so I hope that inshallah you can go back, reread, reflect. And when you're reading Surah Kahf every week, I hope that these meanings can come to mind, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. We are going to be taking a break for a couple of weeks, traveling to Lebanon, inshallah, for some relief, and then it'll be Eid. So, inshallah, we'll take a break for a few weeks, and then we'll resume with Surah Al-Isra. And inshallah, there is a small little section that we have not done the commentary of yet. So what I'll do is when we begin Surah Al-Isra, I'll highlight it inshallah in that. Jazakumullah khair, barakallah fikum. May Allah bless you. Please keep us in your dua. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا استقيموا تراصوا اعتدلوا سدوا الخلل اتصلوا ولا تختلفوا. Straighten the line, leave no gaps, feet and shoulders aligned, stay connected, not divided. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا ومن الليل فتهجد به نافلة لك عسى أن يبعثك ربك مقاما محمودا وقل رب أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق واجعل لي من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا وننزل من القرآن ما هو شفاء ورحمة للمؤمنين ولا يزيد الظالمين إلا خسارا وإذا أنعمنا على الإنسان أعرض ونأى بجانبه وإذا مسه الشر كان يئوسا قل كل يعمل على شاكلته فربكم أعلم بمن هو أهدى سبيلا ويسألونك عن الروح قل الروح من أمر ربي وما أوتيتم من العلم إلا قليلا. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. كلا إذا بلغت التراقي وقيل من راق وظن أنه الفراق والتفت الساق بالساق إلى ربك يومئذ المساق فلا صدق ولا صلى ولكن كذب وتولى ثم ذهب إلى أهله يتمطى أولى لك فأولى ثم أولى لك فأولى أيحسب الإنسان أن يترك سدى ألم يك نطفة من مني يمنى ثم كان علقة فخلق فسوى فجعل منه الزوجين الذكر والأنثى أليس ذلك بقادر على أن يحيي الموتى الله سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم الله سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah. Just wanted to thank you all for coming for Qur'an journey. May Allah bless you and accept and allow it to be a sadaqah jari for all of us. May Allah allow the knowledge to be beneficial and for it to be shareable in the best of ways. I know that we did intend to go all the way till Isha, but my voice is not be able to support the rest of the lecture. So please do forgive me. I do have 6 hours of speaking tomorrow. I know if I push myself tomorrow, I'm going to suffer. فجزاكم khair. We'll continue inshallah when we come back from the break. As we mentioned, we'll be taking a break inshallah until after Eid al-Adha. May Allah bless you, Ya Rabb, and make it a beneficial break for all of us. We'll come back inshallah with Surah al-Isra. جزاكم الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.